2001: A Space Odyssey and the Technological Saving Power of Cinema. Before addressing shadow movement, time's originating as it passes, or causality for the casual set, can we spare a second to ask after technology's provenance? Why presume to know the arrow of technological time's direction? As apes in 2001: A Space Odyssey transition from frames of savagery to effective use of tools to interstellar travel by means of quasi-efficient technology, Heidegger asks, of what essence is modern technology that it happens to think of bringing exact science to use? Or, as Gary Leonard writes in Kubrick's Monolith in Heidegger's Propriety of Event, in the first shot of the sequence where the ape discovers the bone is a hammer, Kubrick shoots from a low angle to show the edge of the monolith bisecting the sun. It is not yet designed as a sundial, but it is already acting as one, dividing the sun into moments, causing a shadow to move, and thereby establishing a cause and effect relationship between the motions of the planetary body and the passing of time. Conflating time with the movement of the shadow, time passes in the sense that it is understood as moving forward and cannot be seen as moving backwards. There is nothing in the revolution of the Earth itself to suggest moving forward or its ideological corollary, progress. End quote. If, as Heidegger says, technology brings us closer to being as a way of revealing and a way of bringing forth, then does technology, from its roots as techne, which was once the poiesis of the fine arts, proceed, or preclude humanity's culpability of being? If, in the Greenwich Mean Time of today, we edge towards corruptive catatonia, dare we then demonize our last rearward-looking attempt at, quote, the revealing that brings forth truth into the splendor of radiant appearance? Might technological discovery be an external drive to object-orient the sorrow and despair of our revulsion against time? Might man have started the technological train in motion pictures of tomorrow in ordet to deliver us from the imaginal inanition of today? On reasoning, in games of chance, trusting technics beyond its comprehensible intelligence is the opposite risk position to Pascal's wager, a wager which boils down to an unenticing, what's to lose but a good time. There's much to be squandered amidst the transhumane annihilation bias of the gambler's ruin. Another Alexandrian library loss could occur with all the ease of mechanical motion needed to corrupt a teraflop of virtual real porn defilations on the Seagate called Moment. The risk is that given enough time and determinism, machinic desire can hallucinate the natural flow of the whole human dreamt entire. We might realize only after immersing ourselves in a metaversion of hell.exe that technology only iterates a for loop of the ever same. But if then, weren't we always in for? A reason, however, to hand the keyframes of intelligence over to deep convolution could be to reconcile that the future is not later than having been. If by then and again we have only technology to reboot our temporal logic operating systems to let us begin again before the blurring begins, when what can no longer technically be called human consciousness begs not to be eternally elongated in the overlapping of the self with the brain-computer interfaced other, would we remember the proprietary technological event not as intruder, not as the frames of the film, but as Leonard's progenitor and remainder? Could we then recall that the monolith of technologic truth is no more than a sundial to dissect the sun, to create time, to unconceal progressive temporality, so that less tenable tenets of temporality can remain unconcealed? Untenable tenets, hinted at by the term prisoner's cinema, meaning closed-eye hallucinations caused by an absence of visual stimuli. If time itself lies hallucinatory and inhospitable, will we wager in good faith backwards and vorwars? Will we implant and then implement the interface to feel a little Dempster-Schaeffer distinguishing between uncertainty and ignorance, to reify what was hoped to be an Kantian perception, intuition, and experience? Merkily, Marienbad. Nimly, the returning hours and rider. Dimly, after sunset. Nominally, omens of millennium, as trees in bloom. Numinally, sunrise. If we are mere event handlers whiling away in a control structure, then a metaverse of Amazon Web Services may indeed be a danger of eternal protension and retention. Or a blockchain may be a saving power of Eisensteinian montage, offer an echo-waving, a retraceable path back into a metaphysical coordinate system. As we might relate from what Einstein says in our elementary school books. Every reference body coordinate system has its own particular time. Unless we are told the reference body to which the statement of time refers, there is no meaning in a statement of the time of an event." End quote. Generally, we accept this. Yet still the images of the monolith appear and reappear at the same time code upon every recurrent embarkation upon the Odyssey. Leonard waits on the thin red line of disembodied reference for an uncaught train. The monolith is always proximate to discovery and development, but it always precedes it, exceeds it, and is never surpassed by it. Buried, unburied, afloat in orbit, or in a dying man's bedroom, it persists as an ineradicable progenitor and remainder, the inscrutable presence of which defamiliarizes the myth of origin." Unquote. As new centroids for the old penitentiary collapse into the accelerated frame of being, can we collide the possible and the post-possible? Can we differentiate and repeat the settings on the eternal return of the same? Leonard writes, "A shot-by-shot analysis of the bone-to-hammer sequence makes it clear Kubrick visualizes it as an uncovering, leading to the emergence of an attitude, primarily exultant and triumphant, that is simultaneous with the emergence of a technological mode of consciousness relative to one's surroundings. Because the unexplained appearance of the monolith precedes this moment, Kubrick's depiction cannot be simply a representation of the dawn of man. Instead, it is the emergence of one mode of knowing among any number of possible modes." With over 50 years of technological evolution to evaluate, we're eager to find the path to the palace of other possible modes. We've had 50 years to wait on what film, the consummate hybrid of technology and time, was telling Gary Leonard about what modes may come. The monolith itself, he writes, were it to be laid on its side, would have the dimensions of a movie screen, so the enframing it permits us to witness is both existential and literally cinematic. Enframing is the condition of possibility that sets up an unconcealment, in this case, the ape positioning himself before the bones." Unquote. Kubrick said the third artifact placed in orbit around Jupiter is waiting for the time when man has reached the outer rim of his own solar system. Seems one day we're framed up fighting over the mud puddle, next we're in some Rococo Techne palace, support settings having terminated our life functions, but also brought us to the saving power's doorstop, beyond the infinite, where the ceiling is no longer uncannily illumined, but the floor, a room where things like conscience and anguish are just inventions, what Kubrick calls a human zoo approximating a hospitable terrestrial environment drawn out of Bowman's own dreams and imagination. Exploding ourselves out through the filmic pod, cast a little older with each epical shift in technological perspective, not necessarily wiser as to where our meat ends, or as to why any omni-benevolent entity worth its gestalt would gestate proteins in some interstellar animal factory, Kubrick describes Bowman's arc. In a timeless state, his life passes from middle age to senescence to death. He is reborn, an enhanced being, a star child, an angel, a superman if you like, and returns to Earth prepared for the next leap forward of man's evolutionary destiny. Sigmund Krakauer's From Caligari to Hitler illustrates how films such as Mabuse the Gambler tried to warn Weimar Germany of the Third Reich's emergence. Historically, we intuit that charges have hyperbolically evolved into a real future by the influence of or a dependence upon a world of movies. Movies are dreams helping us process the past through night and fog, even if it's all forgotten now as the credits reel. Movies predict the future through precognitive awakenings to societal somnambulance, predictions slept on in the 15 years from Caligari to Hitler. Enframed in an empty set of Disneyfied imagery, our particular prisoner's cinema soon to cause hallucinatory world events, the train having long left the station, recall that the tracks remain in place as our primordial connection to the image available in 1080p, Blu-ray, and Betamax. To this end, a good film to show a child is Brief Encounter. A good Tony Perkins picture is Goodbye Again. A good song from the Shining soundtrack is The Awakening of Jacob. Uncertain of technological truth claims up to and including the inherent irrationality of ones that are also zeros, the best we might encourage is to attend these movies as a primary mode of care, to watch what awaits cinematic unconcealment, to watch what still keeps to the trace of the holy in the long laneway, proceeding and preceding the gateway called this regrettable moment. As Kubrick told Playboy magazine, however vast the darkness, we must supply our own light.